without the tax work super well.
Okay, let's say ultra-processed food get taxed heavily and the raw food becomes much more cheaper than the ultra-processed food. Will that alone change people's consumer behavior, or?
So this goes back to your earlier excellent question of going, what is the purpose of doing this? If policymakers start trying to force people who aren't ready to stop eating UPF, it will fail. There will not be popular support. So if you introduce taxes too early and people feel like they're being told to eat their greens, eat their broccoli, I think it won't work. So you have to be careful. But we know when we change the price of food, it dramatically alters what people eat. When you make free fruit and veg available, people eat it. When you make whole milk available in schools, kids drink it. So there is definitely a role for shifting subsidies. I would rather do it at a higher level rather than taxing the products. I would shift other budgets. We have a food system that's subsidized, right? So we think that ultra-processed food is cheap. Now, it is cheap when you buy the bread or the candy bar or the ready meal. It's cheap at the point you buy it. It's very, very expensive later on. So in your taxes, you will pay for the healthcare costs. In your taxes, you will pay the environmental costs. The way the food is produced is these enormous monoculture crops: corn, rice, wheat, soy, plus palm, plus a bit of dairy, plus some meat. I mean, it's made of less than 10 species, basically, plus synthetic additives. So we subsidize all that. So we could change the subsidy so that small producers got the money and real food was cheaper. And we could celebrate real food. In France, when you buy chicken in the supermarket, there are lots of different types of chicken. Now, I'm guessing in Norway, if you buy a chicken to roast in the oven, you just buy a chicken, don't you?
It's there's two types. There's
like organic,
organic and non-organic.
Yeah. So in the UK we have organic or free range, and we've got the welfare, but we've got basically one species of bird. In France, you can buy all these different types of bird that taste slightly different, and they celebrate that. In the same way, they have different types of cheese, and produce has a connection to its soil and its sort of heritage. So we could see the rise of whole food being more than just commodities. We should celebrate, beef from Herefordshire grown on that particular grass, and butter that comes from another part of the country, and potatoes grown in the soil in Norfolk. Those things could all be kind of celebrated, but instead it's just potatoes are potatoes. And basically potatoes in the UK used to make chips.
So the food industry in Italy and France and maybe Spain haven't been able to penetrate the market or
well, that's interesting. Remember, the project of the 15 to 20 transnational food corporations that feed us all, the project must be to destroy all traditional food culture. So if you read the financial documents produced, the shareholder reports produced from these companies, their ambitions are very clear. I quote in the book the chairman of Coca-Cola talking about the number of teenagers, the millions of teenagers around the world that have not had a Coca-Cola this week. Like, it's a massive opportunity. If there are teenagers that haven't had a Coca-Cola today or this morning or in the last hour, that's an opportunity for growth. So whilst Italy, the traditional pizza producers, have some power against the influx of Pizza Hut and Domino's, there you can go and I believe you can get Pizza Hut and Domino's in Italy. Italian coffee, there's Starbucks in Rome, there's McDonald's in Paris. As I came into Oslo from the airport, I passed two Burger Kings and two McDonald's on the short journey from the airport to the hotel. Yeah. So it's like there's nowhere that they won't reach and destroy everything. So I would suggest that France, Italy, Spain are further behind the destruction of their food culture, but it will be destroyed. All of the French cheese, produce, the wineries will all be bought by a few big wine producers. We will get consolidation and these monopolistic practices where there's oligopolies, a small number of companies.
So what is the ultimate long-term goal here? Is it to eliminate ultra-processed food completely from the shelves?
No.
Or to regulate the market or facilitate and educate people?
So I am involved in now trying to set up activism to bring about regulation that will improve human health equality and make life better for people. So we think very carefully about, I don't want to force people to do stuff they don't want to do. The reason we make the arguments about money is because once you understand the flow of money and how the company's hands are tied, it makes the argument you have to have government regulation. So we're making this argument for big government. So the hierarchy of things that must happen are, in Norway, it must go in your national nutrition guidance that, yes, fat, salt, sugar, those foods high in those are harmful, but there is also evidence around ultra-processed, industrially processed food, and those should make a small part of diet, especially for children. That is this guide. You can look up the guidance in a dozen different countries, and they've got great wording about cook at home. That's number one. End the conflicts of interest with the food industry. So if Nestle, Coca-Cola, McDonald's can't pay doctors and scientists, they can't function. So it should become very shameful to take money from these companies. They used to be tobacco companies, for God's sake. Stop taking their money. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And then we need the octagons on the food. Very simple. Loads of evidence. It's been done in South America. It works brilliantly well. Then once food has octagons, well, you can't feed food with a black octagon to a child. So all the cartoon characters, there's no marketing. It stops being available in schools. And you're all the time shifting market forces away from that industry. It will never go away. People want soft bread and chocolate spread and cola drinks. I don't want to ban any of it, I wouldn't ban anything. I would legalize most drugs of abuse. But capitalism, when it is well regulated, is an extraordinary tool for innovation, for lifting people out of poverty. Unregulated capitalism is essentially slavery, monopolies, exploitation, and human suffering. So I don't want a revolution. I want a tweak. And the fact that industry are resisting this so violently is exposing how vulnerable some of the big companies are. There are a few of the big food companies that really have spent so much money on their shareholders, they've got almost nothing left in the bank. They can't evolve, they can't develop, and they may collapse, or they will see a devaluation and they'll be broken up and bought by other people. We'll see the rise of new companies. Those people will not lose their jobs. We'll see a new industry flourish. So I'm very, very optimistic about the ability of the financial system to cope with a couple of octagons on unhealthy food. And I'm really optimistic about the amount of money those octagons will save the state in healthcare budgets, because we cannot afford the new drugs to treat obesity. No one can afford them. What's very cheap is to feed kids healthy food.
Yeah. But what about you? You're with your book and your exposure and your position. What's your next project? What's your next move? What are you going to do with this?
So I work as a doctor. My academic work is more and more about financialization. This system by which corporations, we think of our companies as being like, there's a car company, there's a food company, there's a telecoms company. In fact, our car companies really function as banks. They lend us money to buy cars. Many of our food companies own real estate, or they function as commodity banks. So if we look at the really big food producers, they make a lot of their money on trading contracts around commodity prices. They're not really in the business of making food. And I think exposing the frailties and the vulnerabilities of the economic system is really important to understand the bigger picture of ultra processing. Because the phrase ultra processing, because that processing idea, we think of ultra processing as very much being about like the food processing, the machines and the additives. Ultra processing is just a system of technologies and design processes to create addictive products. And so I think the next bit of work is really looking outside of food and going, what are the other big industries that affect human health? Because we've done tobacco. There is a lot of agreement, I think, amongst the public. Oh, yeah, food is also addictive. Yeah, it was made by tobacco companies. Maybe we should regulate it in the same way. I think people are coming around. Alcohol, vapes, technology. Do we need to start thinking about the financial incentives in those systems, how addictive those things are, and start thinking about regulating them in the same way? So this is not about taking away anyone's fun. This is much more about going, let's create freedom and information for people across other sectors. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Have you thought to dive into the British drinking culture, perhaps? Like drinking for alcohol for like 30 days?
I mean, I could not keep up with British drinking culture. So we have an amazing thing in the UK where when you buy a bottle of booze, when you buy a pack of cigarettes, it is a plain pack and it says smoking kills on the packet. And you can't see the cigarettes in the shop. They're behind a counter.
Yep.
Now, when you buy alcohol, there are alcohol advertisements everywhere in the UK. And every shop will sell you bottles of hard liquor and Alco Pops. And on the bottle, there is often a picture of a pregnant woman with a glass of wine and her hand on her belly and a circle with a line through it. So pregnant women shouldn't drink. Although there is a picture of someone who is pregnant drinking, and underneath it says, enjoy responsibly. That is our regulatory slogan. Now imagine if the cigarette said, enjoy responsibly. It's like the instruction is to enjoy them. The charity that regulates alcohol consumption and marketing is called Drink Aware, like do drink. The reason it's called Drink Aware is because who is the majority funder? The alcohol industry. So it's Diageo's. All the major booze producers fund the public health campaign. Our gambling charity, Gamble Aware, and it says, the slogan is something like, when the fun stops, you should stop. Like gambling is fun, so don't gamble if it's not. It's like saying, cocaine, just stop when you think you have a problem. The whole point of alcohol, cocaine, and gambling is by the time it stopped being fun, you can't stop. That's the point. So, I mean, yes, alcohol. So many of my colleagues, I do food, many of my academic colleagues do alcohol, vapes.
Yeah.
I don't know what your situation here is. Vapes in the UK,
same
we have
thing
like these incredible, beautiful, like white, luscious, sort of high-tech shapes. They're like little Apple earpod devices, and they're like pineapple and tropical fruit flavor. They smell amazing. I mean, it's all about getting kids addicted.
Energy drinks is huge in Norway now.
The energy drinks are just, and it's this incredible branding as like sport, health, energy. No. It's
exactly
refined sugar, addictive drugs, and very weird additives. I mean,
and a lot of caffeine. Most of the products here in Norway is sugar-free. So it's all about the caffeine and the additives, I guess.
And we don't understand. So if you talk to people with diet drink addictions, many people will drink, Diet Coke. There was a very big piece in the New York Times, but people drink 10 cans a day. We have no idea what drives that addiction. So we know that with the food, the reward molecules are sugar and fat. If you can inject the sugar and fat in high dose very quickly, using all the additives and the flavors, and it's very soft, that seems to be what the molecules that drive the reward, although they're not addictive on their own. When you have a diet drink, no one understands why they become addictive, because there's nothing in there. The caffeine and the sweeteners seem to be doing something, but it's not clear at all. No one knows. I mean, almost certainly the drinks companies do know, because they funded previously a lot of quite good research that then some of which got published.
My take on that is the caffeine. I quit coffee drinking just to see how the body reacts. And
how's that going?
It's hard in the first 2 weeks. If you go cold turkey, it's very hard. But once you're off it, it's.
I do it sometimes on the weekend.
You don't want to go back.
I don't have a coffee and I get terrible headaches. Yeah.
Yeah.
We think coffee is pretty harmless. Coffee seems to be quite good for you. I mean, people are always trying to prove that coffee is bad for you because it would be interesting.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to be bad for you. Caffeine, if you have various heart conditions, can precipitate arrhythmias and palpitations, but it's not very harmful. But it is quite addictive, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big difference drinking 1 or 2 cups a day and 10 cups a day. So the addiction gets harder with the more cups. That's my take.
The interaction of these brands with sport, energy, exercise was one of the other really intriguing bits of the book, because when you set out to write a book, it's not all about weight, obviously, but weight is the thing that draws many people to this subject. So many of us want to live at a lower weight. And so I was sure that I was probably writing about 50% of the problem, because obviously some of the fact we're all gaining weight must be to do with our screens. We don't walk to work anymore. We don't work in a mine or on a farm. We sit at desks with computers. And so my big question was like, how much of the problem is really inactivity? And I wanted to do a chapter going, look, there's a whole other thing here that you should know about, and that's the subject for another book. And as I looked into it, it became increasingly clear that inactivity, especially in children, plays almost no role in weight gain. Maybe it's 5%, but all of the research saying that you can exercise and burn off energy, I mean, perhaps not all of it, but like an incredible network of thousands of scientific papers was funded by Coca-Cola. Like a proper conspiracy that was exposed by an amazing journalist at the New York Times called Anahad O'Connor, who's like, he is somewhat like Marit. He was on this story in 2016, and he exposed this network with a guy called Yoni Friedhoff in Canada. So an incredible bit of investigation. Meanwhile, there was this, so Coca-Cola were producing all this misinformation very skillfully, very secretly, as well as funding the Olympics and sponsoring all the energy drinks, sponsoring every sporting event, and creating a general like Coke energy is good. Meanwhile, there was then a huge amount of research showing that being active does not seem to massively change the number of calories